Well, welcome everybody. We'll go ahead and get started with the invocation, which we observe by a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Bajent,
Here.
Clegg,
Here.
Halliburton,
Here.
Sanchez,
Here.
Thompson, Woodings,
Here.
all present.
Thanks. Next up, we have request for approval of the minutes from our work session, our strategic planning session and regular meeting.
Madam Mayor, I move approval of the City Council minutes from the strategic planning session and regular day meeting of August 24th, 2021.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson, Woodings,
Yes.
Bajent,
Yes.
all in favor, motion carries.
Next up, under special business, we have two items. First off, the appointment of Jesus Hara to serve as the Director of the Office of Police Accountability. Jesus is with us today. Welcome. We're so glad that you were able to make it. I just want to say a couple things before putting this nomination forward. Jesus, as you all likely know, served as the interim director for the Office of Police Accountability. And it was in our first working together with a recent incident that we began to have a conversation with Jesus about applying for the position and considering taking this role on full time. Jesus used to work for the city in the former Office of Police Oversight and in HR, moved on to work in HR department for county government elsewhere. And we are so glad to welcome him back home to Boise. And I hope will be a role that's approved this evening. And with that, I'll put his nomination forward.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I imagine we'll have some discussion after, but let me make the motion to appoint Jesus Hara to serve as the Director of the Office of Police Accountability for the City of Boise.
Second.
We have a motion and a second.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This has been an interesting process. I'm the one on the council who's been here since the office was the ombudsman, saw it through some changes to the Office of Police Oversight and now this new office. And I can't tell you how excited I am that we found Jesus to be the director of this office. I think his experience, his life background, his the way he's lived his life and come to us as someone who not only is a dedicated public servant, but also someone who has the life experience to understand how to make this office one that will be, I think, more open, more transparent, and serve the public of this city so well in this time when we need that kind of service. I'm very excited about this nomination and excited that you brought it forward to us. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I've only just met Jesus a few minutes ago, but I'm thrilled that you were willing to take on this role. And I think that it says a lot from our short conversation about the process that we went through in determining what this office needed to look like to best serve our citizens. So that really means a lot that you were willing to do that, that we have a structure that's going to serve our citizens in a fair and transparent way. So thank you so much for coming back to the city and welcome home.
Madam Mayor. Yeah. Can't tell with the masks on sometimes.
No, now that there are masks on, I can't see whose lips are moving.
I'm really thankful that you have applied for this position and that we have the opportunity to vote you in. I'm always interested in when people decide to take on hard positions that they know are going to be difficult and why. And I think a lot of times it's because it matters and they think they can make a difference. And so I just want to thank you for, believing that you can make a difference in this role. Thank you.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Jesus, it's great to meet you, and I had already read about you, and I'm extremely excited about this opportunity for you and for us. Thank you for your willingness to serve in this capacity. You're extremely qualified for this role, and I really think you're the perfect fit.
Madam Mayor, thank you. Jesus, I'm so glad you're here. The fact that you're willing to step up and serve during such a challenging time in our city's history, I think is especially commendable. We live in Idaho, where people who look like you and I very rarely get to sit in positions of leadership. And it's not a small thing, because not only do we have before us the tasks that we're assigned in these roles, we have the additional, some days it's a burden and some days it's an honor, depends on the day. When we get to be role models and inspire the largest minority group in the state, and that is the Latino community. So I welcome you, brother. I wish you every success, and I know our community will be well served by you in this role.
All right. Thank you all. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
Woodings.
Yes.
Bajent.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Right. Jesus, if you'd like to say a couple of things, you are welcome. And welcome. Oh, I should have said congratulations. I'm sorry. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you for the kind words and for the vote of confidence. I had prepared a statement, but as you guys may know, I went through a recent battle with COVID, and it was a hard one. So I'm so glad to be here. A few weeks ago, it didn't look very good. And so, perspective, when you have that time alone, a lot of things go through your head. So one of those, by the way, was the kind of press release that you guys would put away if I didn't make it through. So that just tells you, how some of those moments can go. So anyway, thrilled to be back in Boise. Thrilled to get the opportunity to represent the city and represent our community members. This world of law enforcement that I got exposed to 8 years ago, is very sensitive. And I am very appreciative of the work the officers have in front of them. The work that they do every day is a mighty one. And our office is here to support that endeavor and to call out the good and to call out the bad, right? And so with that, I look forward to the assignment. I look forward to seeing you guys in due time and present any changes to the ordinance, protocols, policies. But anyway, I'm just happy to be here, and I can't say enough the unwavering support that the city has offered me throughout this time. And moving forward, I know many, stand ready to help and ensure success in this office. Thank you. Any questions? I'll take them on.
Thank you and congratulations. I look forward to working with you.
Thank you, Jesus. Before we move on to the next thing, I want to say that we are so glad you're with us, Jesus, as I said at the beginning. And that you said it so well, how important it is for this office and its independence to ensure that the community understands both the good and the bad. And you've demonstrated the ability to jump right in, to understand, to ask independent and tough questions, and to provide us with information as we need it. in such a way that I know that you're prepared for this job with a certainty. And the next steps that you'll be a part of, as was referenced, is that engagement with the community to better understand from the community's perspective how it is that they need to know how to find you, and then how it is that they want and need to feel safe to come forward with concerns. And that process will begin and will help shape those policies and expectations out of the office. And we look forward to learning from the community in partnership with the office and the community engagement division, what it is they're looking for, so that we can continue to maintain the trust that we have in this community overall with our department as we grow. So thank you for being here. And I'm going to take one more liberty. Jesus, you're free. This is not about you. I had hoped to be able to share with council before we started, but wasn't able to. On the topic of COVID, as you saw, the governor had a press release today where he is calling up the guard and sending more resources to hospitals. Primary health, urgent care, primary care providers has informed me that they have reached capacity, and as of 7 o'clock this evening, they will be turning away patients. And we have seen throughout this crisis that our wastewater is the first indicator of what's about to happen. Primary health and other urgent care facilities follow that, followed by impact in hospitals. We have gotten to a point where parts of our community and our hospitals are importantly are in crisis. Our healthcare workers are tired and they've been going at this for a long time. They need our support. People are sick, and as Jesus shared with us tonight, are very, very sick, and we are so glad that he's with us and back in Boise. The public needs to understand. I want to thank Boise School District for requiring masks to protect our children. The numbers of children, the positivity rate is over 20%. The numbers of children being tested have reached the hundreds every day at this point. And if we need the community to get vaccinated, to wear your masks inside as we are in City Hall, and if you're outside in close contact with people, wear your masks. And we've got to do it outside when people are close together as well, to try to get a handle on this while vaccinations are increasing, which we've seen increase in the last couple of weeks. The zip code vaccination rate for Boise is high. There are some areas of our city that need to be higher, and I'm imploring you to do that. And I want to thank the Zoo Boise and the Parks Department for the free vaccination clinic that I believe was with St. Luke's this past weekend. We're going to do another one with St. Al's. They vaccinated 51 people, which was a record for one of these clinics. And the hospitals want to come back and do more. And Thursday night, for First Thursday, here at City Hall in the plaza, there will be a vaccination clinic right outside, starting at 5 o'clock if you're downtown. Visiting stores, enjoying our restaurants. If you're close to people, wear your masks, please. And come by and get a vaccination if you haven't. We're happy to help with that. And with that, I'll move us on to the interim budget changes. Eric. Oh, you're here. Great. I wasn't sure if you were going to be on Zoom.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, we have 4 interim budget changes for your consideration this evening. The first one is for amenities at Franklin Park. This action really represents an advancement of funding from fiscal year 22 that was included in the 22 budget into fiscal year 21 to facilitate the replacement of some, or the procurement of some equipment. This action also includes the recognition of some federal funding that was made available. The second action is for the remodel of Fire Station number 6. The primary funding for this is made available through reallocation of funding from Fire Station number 1. Fire Station number 6, looking at the prioritization of fire station repairs, came in a little bit higher. The third action before you is for the acquisition of some land in the foothills. It's for the purchase of 29 acres adjacent to Pierce Park Lane. This property was signaled to the community that we'd be purchasing this last week. And the fourth item is a revenue neutral item at the Boise watershed, realizing some grant proceeds for the expansion of climate change programming. Be happy to stand for any questions on those.
Madam Mayor, I don't have a question, but I would like to move that we approve the interim budget changes as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Madam Mayor,
Sure.
I just wanted to note, there's a couple of items on here that we're moving up in timing, and I'm very happy to see that. I think in this time of really high growth, figuring out a way to provide these services as soon as we can is a great idea.
Madam Mayor, I just wanted to say, I mean, usually interim budget changes aren't this exciting. Usually it's like, oh yeah, we're gonna do something interesting at the airport. But this one is so great because we get to move up the Franklin Park amenities, which I
No,
think
no
is-
offense to the airport, of course.
No offense to the airport at all, but they generally take care of themselves, I guess is what I'm saying. And so it's really neat to be able to move up the amenities at Franklin Park, which I think that the neighborhood has really been looking forward to for a long time. So that's really great. And it was wonderful to get a little bit of federal funding for that. And the second thing that was really exciting was that STEM Action Center grant for climate change education. You know, talking to kids, I think that there's so much opportunity there to make sure that they're getting educated in the ways that they want to be educated about climate change and the ways that they can have impact. So it's really neat that we're able to offer that programming, that we have a facility in which we can do so. And so thank you. And thank you to staff, everyone who made it work. It's very exciting.
Well said, and I agree. Clerk, you call the roll, please?
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson, Woodings,
Yes.
Bajent.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. Next up, we have the consent agenda. Thanks, Eric. Have a good evening. All items with an asterisk are considered to be routine by the council and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless a council member or citizen so requests, in which case the item will be removed from the general order of business and considered in its normal sequence.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
If I could just make a comment, item number 3 on the resolutions is a resolution of approving the Form L2, which is our property tax certification. A few years ago, we went through a process of making sure that this came to City Council before it got approved. So I just wanted to note it was on here. We did all see it, and we are approving it tonight.
Thank you. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
Woodings,
Yes.
Bajent.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
And now we will move into ordinances for first reading.
Madam Mayor, I ask unanimous consent that all ordinances on first reading be read by number and title only and filed for the second reading calendar.
Without objection,
ORD 41-21. An ordinance for property located at 2605 Linda Vista Lane, amending zoning classifications of the city of Boise City to change the classification of real property particularly described in section 1 of this ordinance and adjacent rights of way from R-1B to R-1C, setting forth a reasoned statement in support of such zone change and provide an effective date.
thank you. Second reading,
Madam Mayor, I ask unanimous consent that all ordinances on the second reading calendar be read by number and title only and filed for the third reading calendar.
without objection.
ORD 40-21, an ordinance CAR 20-00019 for property located at 1522 West State Street, amending zoning classifications of the city of Boise City to change the classification of real property particularly described in section 1 of this ordinance and adjacent rights of way from PCDD pedestrian commercial with downtown design review to C-5DDDA Central Business District with downtown design review and development agreement, setting forth a reasoned statement in support of such zone change and providing an effective date.
Thank you. And now an ordinance on third reading.
Madam Mayor, I move that further reading of ORD 3921 be dispensed with and the record reflect that it has been read for the third time in full.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson, Woodings,
Yes.
Bajent.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries. ORD 39-21, an ordinance relating to the water renewal system of the city of Boise City, Ada County, Idaho, providing for and calling a special election at which there shall be submitted to the electors qualified to vote thereon the question of issuing the city's sewer revenue bonds for the purpose of keeping upfront sewer rates increases low by financing the cost of necessary improvements to the city's water renewal system, providing details in connection therewith and of the election on the question, and providing the effective date thereof.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I move that we approve ordinance 3921.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson, Woodings,
Yes.
Bajent.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. And now we'll move on to new business. And first up, we have subdivisions. Welcome, Cody. This is SUB 21-33. Is the applicant here in the building? Oh, hello, sir. Welcome. All right. And then we don't expect the West Bench Neighborhood Association to be here. Are you in the building? Or online? If you're online, please raise your hand. Nobody's signed up in advance, but let us know if you're here to testify on this. And with that, Cody, take it away.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. This item includes a preliminary and final plat for a subdivision that includes 6 buildable and 1 common lot. The 1.7 acre site is located at 8880 West Corey Lane in an R1C or single family residential zone. For those unfamiliar with the site, it's located just northeast of the Maple Grove and Northview intersection in West Boise. The commission did hear and unanimously recommended approval of the subdivision on August 9th of this year. It was actually identical to a subdivision that was approved in May of 2019. Unfortunately, the improvements, although installed, the plat was never recorded and an extension never requested, which brings us back to you this evening. Again, the subdivision does include 6 buildable lots, each intended for a detached single-family home. Each of the lots meet the dimensional standards of the zone. They'll be served by a private street with attached sidewalk. These improvements, again, with all the utilities, have been installed. Attached sidewalk has also been installed along Corey Lane. There seems to have been a bit of a misunderstanding in the review of grading permits, and that walkway, again, while installed, was originally required to be a detached facility. The commission did debate this a bit at the hearing and debated requiring its removal and replacement with a detached sidewalk. Ultimately, they did support allowing the attached sidewalk to remain. While it's not typically our preference, it is a fairly short segment of roadway with low traffic volumes. And then also almost all of the properties along this segment of Corey Lane have been improved with identical attached sidewalks. So for those reasons, the commission did recommend approval of the subdivision, the preliminary and final plat, and the waiver to allow the attached sidewalk to remain. Thank you.
Any questions for Cody?
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Thank you. Cody, one of the things that gets lost when we have an attached sidewalk is a tree lawn and trees along the street. I know that this is just a subdivision, but are there plans to plant trees along the street behind the sidewalk?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Clegg, there are not common lots along Corey Lane there, but it is set up, they are set up as corner lots. So you'll have a sizable, side yard. It's the southern side of those properties. So I would imagine each of the lots would want, their own shade trees on that private landscape. but nothing required through the subdivision, no.
So I bring this up because we are rewriting our zoning code, and there is an opportunity to fix this even on private lots. I think those that front sidewalks, we should look and see if there's something we can do about shading the sidewalk. Madam Mayor, one other question, if I might. As I look at this, opportunity lost. We have an identical or pretty close to identical cul-de-sac to the north. No pathway connecting those. While a roadway probably wouldn't be appropriate, a pathway would sure be nice. So again, we've got two of these now on this particular block, and no connection so that folks can visit their neighbors, kids can visit with adjoining kids, those kinds of things. We hopefully do a better job of that in the future as well.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Clegg, I think there are actually several, this is probably a poster child for where we, some missed opportunities over the years in terms of connectivity. Even to the east, we have an almost identical situation with back-to-back cul-de-sacs where a street connection might not have made sense, but certainly a micropath at a minimum. So definitely noted.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. Sir, would you like to, you can come up and testify. You can let us know you're in agreement with the terms and conditions of the staff report if you are. All right, I'm not going to make you walk all the way up here, but I will repeat for the record that the applicant is here and he is in agreement with the terms and conditions of the staff report. Thank you. Just want to make sure nobody else is here for this. Any further questions for staff? All right, then I think a motion is before us.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I move approval of SUB 21-33 Villa Nostra subdivision at 8880 West Corey Lane, preliminary and final plat.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Clerk, will you call the roll?
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson, Woodings, Bajent.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you, and welcome back, Cody, for our first public hearing, CAR 21-14. We've got Cody presenting first, and then Rebecca. Oh, great, sorry. It's so hard for me to see who's who these days. So the applicant, Rebecca McKay, is here. We don't expect SWACA, Marissa Keith. She's not here. Is she on Zoom? And nobody has signed up in advance.
Oh, excuse me, Madam Mayor, Marissa Keith is online.
Oh, great. Hi, Marissa. Okay, so we will start with Cody, then move on to the applicant, and then hear from Marissa Keith with the Neighborhood Association.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. As you noted, this item includes both a request for a rezone and a preliminary plat. Both applications are required for the development of a subdivision that includes 18 buildable lots. The 4.2 acre site is addressed at 9435 West Overland Road, which is on the south side of Overland, about a quarter mile west of Maple Grove Road. The property is currently zoned A1 or open land. The proposal is to change the zoning to R1C or single family residential with a development agreement. That agreement will limit the property to the 18 homes proposed. That requirement is consistent with the standards for the airport influence area in which the site is located. While the agreement caps the density, the rezone will allow the smaller lots and setbacks of the R1C zone. As you can see here, the property does abut R1C zoning with the properties to the east. And then to the west, while you do have R1B zoning with larger setbacks and lots, there is a common lot that's about 35 feet wide for the farmer's lateral that provides a good transition to those other properties. As you saw in your packet, the commission did find that the change in zoning was consistent with the approval criteria. And again, that was further ensured by the provisions that were included in the development agreement. Moving on to the subdivision, again, it includes 18 buildable lots, each intended to support detached single-family homes. The lots range in size from just over 5,000 to a little over 7,000 square feet and 50 to 67 feet wide. Those dimensions are consistent with the standards or requirements of the R1C zone. The subdivision includes no waivers or variances. Access to the subdivision will come from the extension of Surf Street a public roadway. Along with the travel lanes, it does include the extension of existing attached sidewalks. While the street will not access Overland Road, emergency access will be provided in that location. And that emergency access will also allow pedestrians to access the site from Overland. Along Overland Road, a condition of approval does require the installation of new detached sidewalks to replace an existing attached facility. Finally, in terms of connectivity, the applicant, through conditions of approval, was required to provide a pedestrian easement along the canal. As you saw on the record, there was some back and forth at the commission on this and a subsequent exchange with the irrigation district. I believe we have that all worked out. Our team did meet with the irrigation district and clarified their requirements. So as conditioned, while they're not improving a pathway at this time, they will be required to provide an easement for the future installation of that accommodates the future installation of that facility. And it will allow it to be done as part of a larger project. My understanding is that the applicant agrees with this approach and condition. Finally, I would briefly mention that the existing farmhouse and I believe 5 trees will be removed with the project. However, all of the trees along the existing lateral will be retained and 22 new trees will be provided in common areas. We'll also have new trees in each residential lot. And so that combination of trees will provide appropriate mitigation for the 5 that are removed. I believe that wraps up my comments. As indicated in the packet, the commission did recommend approval of both the rezone and subdivision. They found both consistent with the policy guidance of Blueprint Boise and the objective standards of the development code. And so with that, we are recommending approval of both applications this evening. Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Thank you. Cody, since this is a rezone, I'm curious why we didn't ask for the pathway to be built.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Clegg, we certainly could through the development agreement. That certainly could be a requirement. It would end, at Overland clearly, and then to the south would dead end or
Sure.
could somehow maybe tie back into the public street system there. It'd be, I guess, temporarily for an uncertain amount of time, be somewhat of a loop within the project, but we certainly could require that this evening.
Thank you. And then second question, and I'll ask this of the applicant, and you can tell me, it looks to me like at least some of those trees around the farmhouse would well serve whatever houses get built on those 2 lots. And I'm curious why the need to remove those trees. None of them seem to be in the roadway. One of them, I guess, ends up being in the roadway, but some of them are not. And I'm just curious why all of them have to be removed.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Clegg, you're right. It could be by the time we place a home on this property, it's going to be certainly close to the drip line, if not the trunk of those trees. I'd let the applicant, I suppose, speak to that. It could be that they be retained until construction of that home and an attempt be made to save them.
Okay, I just know if I were buying a lot like that, I'd snap up the one that had a tree on it. Thanks.
Other questions? All right, doesn't look like there are right now. Rebecca, okay, welcome. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I'm Becky McKay with Engineering Solutions, business address 1029 North Rosario and Meridian. I'm here representing the applicant Sterling Land Development on this particular piece of property. As staff indicated, this property is 4.17 acres. It's an infill parcel. It's very small. It's currently within the city limits. It's zoned A1. And we are requesting a rezone to R1C and a preliminary plat approval of 18 single-family lots and 4 common lots. I did my neighborhood meeting out at the site. We did have a good attendance at the neighborhood meeting. We had 16 property owners. We had it at the site. to be safe during the COVID. The biggest concern was their fence along our eastern boundary is very dilapidated, and some of the posts have been compromised, and they asked if we would remove their fence and install a new fence. And we told them that obviously with the consent of their HOA and all of the adjoining neighbors, we would be glad to coordinate with them, remove that fence and install a new fence along that common eastern boundary. That seemed to please most of the people. Their other concern was traffic, as far as we are required to connect to Surf Street, which is a stub street. Ada County Highway District indicated that Overland Road is a mobility corridor, that they would not allow us to have any access due to the fact that it's currently 5 lanes, anticipated to be 7 lanes in 2036. And so they said, you know, our policy manual dictates that you shall take access at the lesser designated street, which happens to be Surf Street, the stub there on our southeast boundary. The fire department was concerned about the cul-de-sac length. When we connect to Surf Street from Coronado, I did send over to Romeo Gervais an emergency vehicle access plan, which would also serve as a pedestrian access linkage out to the existing Overland sidewalk. He indicated that that would be acceptable. We did coordinate with the Boise Airport. I coordinated with Matt, and he indicated we are within the B1 designation, but we are outside that contour for the 2020 noise 65 decibel. Therefore, he said that the 4.2 dwelling units that we were requesting was well within an acceptable level, that they had allowed a higher density to the east, closer to Maple Grove. And so he said we were fine, and he had no objections. Blueprint Boise encourages obviously infill. This council, Madam Mayor, has indicated we need to go out there as a planning community and develop these infill parcels that have existing sewer and water facilities, existing stub streets, are along mobility corridors, which have public transportation. You have a commercial center at Maple Grove. We have commercial to the north, that's mixed use. We are surrounded by single family residential with the Mill Creek development being R1A, R1B. And then to the east, we have Coronado subdivision, which is R1C. The staff had indicated that they felt that we complied with the suburban designation. As far as our density is concerned, we fall within that range. We only have 334 feet of frontage along Overland Road. One of the things that was discussed at the Planning and Zoning Commission was the issue of the attached existing sidewalk. If you look down Overland Road, there's vertical curb and attached sidewalk all along that south side of Overland Road, as far as you can see. Staff had indicated that they wanted us to detach the sidewalk, go in, tear out that 5-foot walk, that vertical curb, because it's a monopore. I can't leave it. It's got to be jackhammered out. My question to them was, what about that transition? We are 2 to 3 feet lower than Overland Road. And so we're not allowed to construct sidewalk that sits low. We have to match that center line elevation for Overland Road to be in compliance with Ada County Highway District's policy manual. And so I'm going to have to connect on the east side to that attached walk. We're going to have to fill and then detach the walk and then swing it back and then make it and then L it back into the attached walk. And it just seemed very cumbersome, very expensive for 338 feet. We do have a 35-foot landscape buffer that's proposed. We also have a common lot there. So we'll be treeing it. Councilman Clegg mentioned, can't you install trees along the attached walk to create shade? We're doing that. I've had my engineer working all day on that detached walk. We also have the complexity of there's an existing irrigation pipe and boxes, and there's existing transmission poles all along there right at the back of that existing walk. So we have a lot of conflicts and we just don't have a lot of room to make the transition. So from my planning perspective and the 30 years that I've been doing this, I would like to leave the attached sidewalk if at all possible. I'm not saying that it is impossible to do detached walks, but it is going to be expensive. And obviously, when we have only 18 lots, one of the things that concerns me is affordability. These infill projects, the more requirements that are piled on them, the higher the price of the lots, the higher the price of the homes. And I know that we're struggling to provide housing for local residents that is affordable. On bigger projects, obviously it makes sense. We have the latitude. Ada County Highway Districts are also requiring that we dedicate 22 additional feet. So that sidewalk's going to be set way back. We're going to have 22 feet of additional right-of-way. They want a total of 80 feet of right-of-way so that they can have a 7-lane mobility corridor in the future. We've also, if you look at our site plan, we do have like a tot lot up in the northwest corner, and we also have a tot lot down there kind of in the southeast corner. Talked to my client, they want to put some play equipment or something in there. We want to have some use there. We have the farmer's lateral that runs all along our west boundary and along our south boundary. The farmer's lateral has a 40-foot easement west of center line and a 20-foot easement east of center line on our side. We have that in a separate lot, so none of our buildable lots encroach into the Nampa Meridian easement. I have had many conversations with Greg Curtis at Nampa Meridian. He was alarmed at first with the city wanting us to grant an easement within their easement, but after the city staff met with him, he said he was comfortable with that he just wanted the city to reach out to him, and if they want to expand their pathway system, he wants them to abide by the 2001 agreement between the city of Boise and Nampa Meridian as far as cooperation on these multi-use pathways. The city of Boise already has public easements along that farmer's lateral to the south of us, and it's all along the south side. So this little stretch here on our side really won't connect to anything. We are willing to, like I said, grant the easement to the city so that in the event they enter into an agreement with Nampa Meridian that this is a designated multi-use pathway. That's great. To make us build this little stretch of pathway is going to be expensive. I've got a lot of trees there. Staff has also indicated that they want me to save all the trees that are along the farmer's lateral. It's really a beautiful corridor. There's critters out there. And so the question arose from Councilman Clegg about the trees around the existing home. 3 of those trees are fall within my 35-foot landscape buffer. So obviously those could be preserved. There are three trees that are in lot 7. And so one falls obviously within the sidewalk. The other 2 are within the lot.
Ma'am, you're over. I have a feeling this is a question the council president wants answered, but I'll leave that to her.
We will try to preserve the trees as much as possible. I'm always for that. I love mature trees. Can I answer any questions? Thank you.
Madam Mayor. Well, thank you, Becky. It's good to see you. So a couple of questions. Without looking, and I'm trying to pull up the GIS, so I apologize, I can't see it. I do see on just our lotting map that it looks like there's an easement also on the north side of this creek in the Coronado subdivision and the one that's on South Kimball. Regardless, without knowing that, it doesn't look like on your site plan that you have any plans to connect to that easement on the eastern boundary south of Surf Street. So at very least, I would ask that a connection to that easement be allowed, be put in on the very east side of your property, south of Surf. Have you thought about that?
On the east side, on south
At
of Surf, to
yeah,
go, oh,
lot
straight
21.
down to the south?
Right. So you could actually get to the pathway.
I think we could probably put a micropath there. I do have a map that shows your existing Boise City easements, and they're in blue.
We can pass it, I think.
So that is south of this subject property.
Yeah,
So you're saying make a micropath connection to the south.
yes.
Okay.
And then secondly, on the attached sidewalk, you know, where do you start? Where do you end? If you
I
don't
understand.
detach it somewhere, then everybody next will say, well, they didn't detach it. Why should we have to?
Understood.
On the other hand, the idea that you're supposed to provide, you know, this extra 20 or 30 feet so that they can have an 80-foot right of way to widen the road makes it sort of problematic because you don't know where the curb and gutter is supposed to go and all of those things, and it might change in the future. One of the things I guess we might be able to explore, this is a preliminary plat, so, you know, you can explore things and come back, recognizing that the utility poles are there. The reason for the attached sidewalk is how uncomfortable it is to walk along Overland today at 35 miles an hour, 2 feet from the traffic. And so one of the things that we might be able to explore, Cody, you can tell me if I'm wrong, is just widen that existing sidewalk to a full multi-use path width, which would be a minimum of 10 feet. And I don't know if that would work for sure, but, and I know you'd have to go around the utility poles. I get that. They're there. Yeah, I know. They're just a little, but it's not like in the middle of the 3 feet where most of these utility poles end up. It would be in the
Yeah,
middle of
they
a
would end up having to
multi-use.
move
Yeah,
them back. You're absolutely correct, in order to widen Overland Road.
yeah. And then finally, I guess, thank you for coming back with a plan to preserve whatever trees you can. And I would like to explore actually getting a pathway on that easement. Again, not knowing what the GIS map looks like and where the trees are. I don't know what that looks like, but before preliminary plat, I would like to explore that, even if it's just a gravelled surface, which is what it is on the south side today. At least it would be recreation for the folks who live there.
I have a picture of the tree. They're pretty close to the top of the bank.
Yeah,
So
behind them.
you know.
I mean, the easement's not going to do us much good if we have to take all the trees out to build a pathway and everybody's going to scream at us to do that. So we should figure that out now, not pretend like we have an easement that's usable for a pathway if it's
Yeah.
not.
I guess Nampa Meridian's position was that under that 2001 agreement, that the city has to negotiate with the district to designate any additional or new paths.
Yeah,
And they said the farmer's lateral was not listed as one of those designated paths. And then if you go south, you guys own property, as I showed you in blue in fee simple, that was supposed to be the pathway, which has never been built.
Mhm. But you can't get to it.
You can't get to it.
So anyway, those are the issues I see with this. I think housing in general, obviously I'd actually encourage higher density. We need more housing. But the rest of it to me seems to work.
Thank you.
All right, it looks like there are no further questions right now. If I remember correctly, Marissa Keith from Southwest Ada County Alliance is on Zoom. Welcome, Melissa.
Hi, Marissa Keith, 3279 South Cloverdale, president of the Southwest Ada County Alliance Neighborhood Association. I'm really just here observing tonight. I don't have really much comment other than to say I appreciate the pedestrian and the connectivity aspects of this project. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Any questions for Marissa? Alrighty. We will, I'm gonna check. I don't have anybody that signed up in advance unless that changed here. Let me just double check. Nope. Anybody here to testify for this? Is there anyone online?
No, Madam Mayor.
All right, thank you, Shar. Alrighty, that's all for people. Are there further questions for council? Council President, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Cuddy, I do have a question. If we were to explore these things I talked about, it's easy to add the pathway to the south off Surf. Not quite so easy to say, build a pathway along the creek without doing the due diligence about whether Nampa and Meridian will support it. Maybe not quite so easy understanding if that's a good trade-off for a multi-use path versus a detached sidewalk. Those things are in the development agreement or not. And if we were to approve the rezone without amending the development agreement, how would we enforce the direction if we chose to go that direction?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Clegg, I think where there's some uncertainty around it, it would be, my suggestion would be that we bring back kind of an analysis of each of those topics at the final plat stage and then address it then. If you're confident and with certainty want those as conditions, I would suggest they be included in the development agreement now, but recognizing there's, perhaps some give and take probably between the preliminary and final plat.
So if we chose to do that tonight, the direction would be to explore those, bring back a development agreement with those added conditions for approval after, because we'd approve the rezone tonight if we went that direction, but not approve the development agreement, ask for it to be brought back.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Clegg, we could certainly bring the development agreement back along with a final plat or approve it with the development agreement this evening, just as written, and we'll just address it through the subdivision. The zoning will be in place, and then instead of the final plat being on consent, we report back on these couple of things and address it there.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Cody, some probably related questions here. I'm just looking at the map and trying to understand where a pathway would actually continue to connect in the future, knowing that when you go down, is it South Coronado Avenue, if it were continue to go straight, there's actually private property around that curve of the canal that would be potentially difficult to develop or go into. And so for a pathway to continue, you would either have to go through that private property or you'd have to create a bridge to go to the other side. Am I kind of looking at that map correctly?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, it does get tricky back there behind those 2 or 3 lots at the end of Coronado. There's canal easement there. We would have the opportunity to continue to work with the canal company, with the irrigation district to get that. And then similarly on the property further to the east. So while it would be challenging, it wouldn't be necessarily impossible to get that connection in the future.
Sure. And then Madam Mayor, just one follow-up question.
Yes.
So further to the southeast, there's another really large undeveloped lot as well, that at some point on Kimball Street,
That's now developed, I think.
that
Can't hear you, Council President. No, Council President, we just couldn't hear what you were saying.
Oh,
it is now developed. Okay. On the Google map here, or the shot that we've got, it's not developed, but in real life, it actually is.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, correct. You
Great.
can, you can even see a hint right here off of Kimball where a micropath connection was stubbed down there to the, to the canal bank effectively, but it is subdivided now.
Great. And then along that whole stretch of the farmer's lateral, is there also a pathway easement on that section?
Madam Mayor, as you get further to the east, that there is not, there's space to provide that. You can kind of see the service, the service road for the canal, but no, that's older and I'm unaware of an easement there.
Great. And I guess the reason I ask these questions is just I want to see pathways along the canal as much as anybody. I think that other council members know that, but with uncertainty of where it's going to be and what's going to happen, what the kind of surface area is going to look like, it would be nice to have that detailed a little bit further before something was added, I guess, onto this particular agreement.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, I would suggest that at a minimum, we want that easement. I mean, there's always a chance we'll work things out. And then between preliminary and final plat, we could bring back some further analysis on just how it might connect and what interim, I mean, Councilmember Clegg mentioned perhaps a gravel surface as an interim step. So we can certainly report back on that at the final plat stage.
Great.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
if I could just follow up, it looks to me on the lotting map that we're looking at that there is some kind of a common lot or an easement both on the development on Coronado Avenue and the one on South Kimball along that north and east side of the lateral. I don't know if it connects. I don't know if it's an easement. I don't know if it's common lot, but it does look like there is an opportunity there. And Councilmember Halliburton, to the east and south then is a connection to the 5 Mile Creek Trail. So it really could potentially provide really great connectivity in this pretty disconnected cul-de-sac world of neighborhood that otherwise doesn't have much. And so that was my thinking in trying to get as far as we could with it now.
All right. Well, if there's nothing further.
Madam Mayor, given that staff has given us 2 ways to go forward on this, I think probably the cleanest way is to go ahead and approve the rezone and development agreement as is and add additional conditions to be brought back on the final plat. So if that's the motion I'll make, if I get support.
Second.
I would move that we approve CAR 2114 Engineering Solutions LLP 9435 West Overland Road, rezone of 4.2 acres from A1 to R1C with a DA.
Second.
We have a motion and a second discussion.
Madam Mayor?
Yep.
I guess my only regret is that this isn't actually a little bit higher density. We need housing desperately. We need it as soon as possible. So certainly support the housing that will go in here.
All right.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I just know that I do agree based on everything that you'd said about what we need to work out, that it makes sense to approve this and then sort the rest out later with the development agreement and the final plat, rather than hashing it out now, because it doesn't seem like we actually know everything we need to know to make that decision. So I very much support your motion.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
Woodings,
Yes.
Bajent,
Yes.
all in favor, motion carries.
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve Box Elder Creek subdivision, SUB 2120, Boise City preliminary plat with the additional conditions that staff explore actually building the pathway and not just getting the easement along the farmer's lateral, that a connection to that easement be added with a micropath from West Surf Street to the easement on the east side of the property at block 21. And that staff bring back to us an analysis of adding 5 feet to the existing sidewalk, making a multi-use pathway versus the detached sidewalk that's required today, and that the developer preserve all of the mature trees on the lot that is possible.
Second.
Motion and second discussion. All right, clerk.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
Woodings,
Yes.
Bajent,
Yes.
all in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. Thanks, Rebecca. All right, next up, we have an appeal of CUP 21-15. We have, welcome Kevin Holmes presenting for Planning Development Services, then the appellant David Haas, the applicant Jody Knopf, and then we will have the public. I'll call on people. One person signed up in advance, Melissa Regan. Is Melissa here or on Zoom? On Zoom? Okay, great. So we'll get to Melissa first, and then I'll see who else is here. Go ahead.
Perfect. Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. So before you use an appeal for the Planning and Zoning Commission's approval of a conditional use permit for a wireless communications facility located here in the public right of way at 40 North Oahe Street in R1C zone. So we're up here in the depot bench area in a residential neighborhood where Oahe Street dead ends at a canal and a railroad line. The proposed facility shown there on the left is very similar to all those micro cell poles you see popping up co-located on streetlights and utility poles. In this case, though, there are no co-location opportunities. So it does fall under the definition of a standalone monopole under the height limit of the zone, which is 35 feet. So as a result, a conditional use permit is required. In their meeting back in June, the commission found that the application met all the approval criteria for a CUP and approved it with associated conditions. Following the commission's decision, the appellant submitted an appeal application with the grounds that you see here. No other supporting memorandum were submitted, so I'll just very briefly go over the city's responses to these. So the first 2 items were in fact submitted with the original application and deemed to be sufficient for the required review. The second 2 items are quite simply not required as part of a CUP application. The specifics of electrical equipment would be reviewed under a related building or electrical permit. And that last item there is not a requirement of any planning application that I'm aware of. So as this is the case, the planning team cannot find any place where the commission erred in their decision to approve the conditional use permit. Therefore, we are recommending that the appeal be denied and the original approval be upheld. Thanks.
Any questions for staff? Thanks, Kevin. All right, now we have David Haas. David, is David on?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Great. Welcome, David. Just before you get started, at times there's a lag between us and what you're seeing. So if you're able to see a stopwatch once it starts, that'd be great. Otherwise, you'll hear me not intentionally speaking over you, but letting you know your time is up.
Okay, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, were you able to hear me, David?
Yes, I was able to hear you. Yes, I have a stopwatch here as well.
Yeah, we can hear you and we can see you and we can see what I think is your slideshow that says my name is David DeHaas.
There you go.
Great. All right, go ahead.
All right, my name is David DeHaas, 1016 South Vista, Boise, Idaho. Job 1 for this city council is protect public safety. That is your duty. As residents, we have the right to the quiet enjoyment of our streets and our homes. This means preserving our public safety, our privacy, and our property values. Denying this wireless facility application should be an easy decision for you tonight. By citing your local code, you can deny the application because the applicant has provided no probative or substantial evidence of a significant gap in carrier-specific telecommunications service, as the applicant must do per the 2005 Ninth Circuit ruling in Metro PCS versus San Francisco. This U.S. Federal Court of Appeals ruling requires the applicant to measure the existing carrier-specific signal strength levels and to prove that the signal level is not sufficient for outdoor telecommunication service in order to establish the need for any additional wireless facility. The applicant has simply not done so. The propagation map the applicant provided is merely a colored drawing akin to a comic strip. The analysis lacks any substantial evidence to prove a significant gap in coverage or even the power inputs and outputs to make any such determination. The council and I can simply just cite this lack of substantial evidence as the basis of your decision to deny this application, easily win any potential future court challenge. Please explain in the years since we first met that the city has failed to equip the department with a neutral RF professional to evaluate such applications. Failure to do so has resulted in the applicants controlling the entire process to the detriment of residents' public safety, privacy, and property values. When it comes to approving applications for buildings, the city has electrical, plumbing, inspectors, structural engineers, but RF microwave radiation professionals are nowhere to be found in the city staff of listed contractors. Finally, by far and away, the strongest reason to reject this application is the August 13th, 2021 ruling in the U.S. State Court of Appeals, DC Circuit. The ruling in this case, Environmental Health Trust versus the FCC, changed the wireless industry landscape significantly. This case is about the FCC's attempt to avoid court-mandated environmental review to establish the adequacy of the existing FCC microwave radiation guideline. The FCC got caught again. In the ruling, the judges wrote the following: we grant the petitions in part and remand to the commission. The commission failed to provide a reasoned explanation for its determination that its guidelines adequately protect against the harmful effects of exposure to radiation, radio frequency radiation. With all of these shenanigans that have been serially perpetuated by the FCC on behalf of the wireless industry, it's no wonder that there is not one insurance company that will provide insurance against the health claims for injury, illness, or death. In response to the substance fact and law that I'm entering into the public record tonight, I am requesting that you do please do the following: deny this application, establish an emergency moratorium on all new applications for wireless telecommunications facilities of any size or any G until the FCC completes its court-mandated environmental rule in August 2019. Power off any antennas in your jurisdiction that are outputting RF microwave radiation to frequencies above 6,000 megahertz until the FCC completes environmental review. Thank you.
Madam Mayor,
Yes, go ahead.
I just want to, it's not really a question, it's just a comment. I want to note that the address the gentleman gave has been mailing to my home voluminous information about 5G, which I interpret to be harassing and attempt to intimidate. I don't appreciate it. I don't think it's necessary. It doesn't influence what I'm going to do in this decision or in this meeting, but it's not necessary. We have a public forum and a public place to have these conversations. We're in it now, and speaking on behalf of myself, and I suspect all other elected officials, I would appreciate it if you respected my privacy, just as you've asked the city respect the privacy of its residents in your presentation today.
Questions for the appellant? All right, with that, we will hear from the applicant. Jody Knopp. Hi there. If I can share my screen real quick. Thank you. All right. Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the council. I will be, well, first of all, thank you, Kevin. I will be presenting a brief review of the permit process and the project details on behalf of Verizon Wireless. I know you are all very aware of this project, but please feel free to ask questions. So this is a permit for Verizon Wireless small cell facility located in the public right-of-way near the intersection of North Owyhee Street and West Kipling Road. Jody,
Yes.
could you speak a little closer to the mic or a little louder? Thanks.
Yes. On March 29th, Verizon Wireless submitted their CUP application. On June 8th, Boise Planning and Development issued their project report recommending approval with conditions.
The public hearing was held on June 14th, where the Planning and Zoning Commission unanimously voted to approve the application. They found that the wireless communication facility complies with the Boise City Code and would be a benefit to not only the wireless companies, but also the businesses, residents, and schools in the area. An appeal was filed with the City Council on June 24th of the Planning and Zoning Commission's approval of the wireless communication facility application. The four grounds of appeal with no additional supporting documents were improper propagation study, map is not a study, failure to have an engineer approved signed plans for power and pole, no specific specifications as to power and equipment, no proof of liability insurance for health effects signed by the applicant or end user Verizon. Melissa will address these more in depth in a few minutes. I'd like to cover the necessity of this site. The site is needed because the existing sites do not provide sufficient service to the intended area. This particular wireless communications facility will introduce new technology as well as to help enhance coverage and offload capacity throughout the area. To give you a visual demonstration of the need for this facility, the following propagation studies show the coverage of the area. Here's the before map. As you can see in the before map, there's currently no 5G ultra wideband coverage. The next map shows the approximate coverage after the proposed site is installed. As you
Madam
can
Mayor?
see, yes,
I think, are we supposed to be seeing some maps right now?
I thought I was screen sharing. Are we out? Did I get kicked out?
Oh, it sounds like we need to make you a panelist so that you can share from there.
Let's try it again. There we go. Okay, so here is the after. I'll go back to there's the before. And this is the approximate coverage after the proposed site is installed. As you can see by the green, yellow, and gray shading, the site will provide needed coverage to a portion of the neighborhood and again, be a benefit to local businesses, residents, and schools. And at this time, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Melissa Reagan, who will be taking over.
Good evening. This is Melissa Reagan on behalf of Verizon Wireless. I'm an attorney at Sherman and Howard in Denver, Colorado, 633 17th Street, Suite 3000. And I'll be quick here in the interest of time. Jody, if you wouldn't mind just going to the next. Just as Mr. Holmes presented his presentation and Verizon agrees with everything in Mr. Holmes' presentation and the staff recommendation that the appeal be denied. In particular, as the piece, the Planning and Zoning Commission's decision is presumptively valid. And as Mr. Holmes stated, there's no error that can be identified by the city. I wanted to touch briefly on the propagation maps that you just saw. We've previously presented these to the City Council for another appeal hearing back in November. And the City Council found that they were sufficient and they met the code requirements. Additionally, the appellant argued that we have not demonstrated any significant gap in coverage. These maps have shown that, but in addition to that, under the September 2018 FCC order, the FCC actually stated and changed the requirement as to what constitutes an effective prohibition. And if it is that we are materially limited or inhibited in the ability to provide wireless service, that's the standard. It's not whether or not we have demonstrated a significant gap in service or feasible alternatives, in particular because the wireless industry has changed and the facilities and the types of services that are being provided are changing with respect to data and capacity and the like. The other thing I just wanted to touch on briefly that was raised by the appellant is a recent DC Circuit order that was issued and came out in August of 2021, 13th, just a few weeks ago. And the appellant had incorrectly argued that has changed the landscape. Just to provide some guidance to the City Council with respect to that order. It has not and did not overturn the existing federal telecommunications statute or the existing FCC regulations with respect to RF admissions. Those are still the valid law and the regulations that the City Council is required to follow. So under the current federal telecommunications statute, local jurisdictions can't deny applications for wireless facilities if they comply with the RF admission standards as set by the FCC. Wireless providers, Verizon Wireless, will not receive a license for its facility from the FCC unless it meets these current existing regulations and standards, which Verizon's facility will do so. What the order did, in fact, was it evaluated the FCC's 2019 order regarding FCC regulations and asked simply that the FCC provide more reasoned explanation for its determination that the current FCC guidelines are adequate with respect to RF exposure. And it's just remanded the FCC to provide that further reasoning. It did not issue any moratoriums. It's not required to redo its regulations or anything. And so until that remand is complete, the existing rules and regulations remain in place and they cover wireless facilities. So with that, we would just, again, incorporate all of Mr. Holmes' presentation tonight, request that the City Council deny the appeal and uphold the PZC's decision to issue Verizon's application or permit for its application. And we are happy to answer any questions the City Council may have.
All right, it looks like there are none right now. Thank you. Thank you, Jody. Thank you, Melissa. So I have parties of record. I have one person that signed up on the piece of paper, so I'll start with Mr. Spiker. And I'm just checking. Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, yeah, I was about to say you were not a party of record for this one. All right, thanks. Okay, with that, is anybody here for this item in the room? Okay, anyone online?
No, Madam Mayor. Oh, I'm sorry. We just had a request from Hank Allen.
Yes, and I see that he's a party of record, so Hank will get you set up to speak.
And we also have Vivian Lockery, who's also a party of record.
Vivian, okay, great, thanks. Go ahead, Hank.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Hank Allen, 687 West Rush Court, Eagle, Idaho. Thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. I'm requesting City Council members to vote yes in favor of this appeal to deny the cell tower conditional use permit application. This tower is simply not needed. There is no significant gap in coverage. And I'm here to tell you that non-ionizing RF radiation from cell towers pose a significant risk to human health and life safety. Despite what the FCC says and the attorneys tell you, I'd like to share my personal struggles that are ongoing right now and over the past 4 months regarding a cell tower in Eagle, Idaho. On April 15th of 2021, Verizon switched on a macro tower, cell tower, 600 yards from my house here in Eagle. Within a week of the tower being switched on, I was admitted to the ER with my heart in AFib. For those of you who've never been in AFib, my heart felt like it was jumping out of my chest and my heart rate was at 174 beats per minute. The ER was very, very concerned with this and admitted me immediately with my wife in tears. This was scary to say the least for myself and my family. St. Luke's used their paddles to cardiovert my heart back into a normal sinus rhythm. Over the following 2 months, I was readmitted to the ER 4 additional times with full-blown AFib. My children were also complaining of fits of unexplained fatigue and headaches when they were in my backyard facing the cell tower. I subsequently reached out to my neighbors here in Eagle via Nextdoor with a brief description of my symptoms, AFib, and other environmental conditions, not relating to the cell tower, just in general, talk about my symptoms that were going on. 20 neighbors responded within my small community, all complaining of the same symptoms and all waiting to see a cardiologist because of heart palpitations and AFib symptoms. We live on a small farm here in Eagle, and I have fruit trees, livestock, and I also have a couple beehives. Within about 2 weeks of the cell tower being turned on, my beehives were completely decimated. They were in direct line of sight of the cell tower. All the bees were killed. I also observed there was no honeybees pollinating my 8 fruit trees in the backyard. They were all within a direct line of sight of the cell towers. By the end of June, the tree canopies between my house and the cell tower started filling in, which provide coverage and reduce the radiation levels at my house. I also spent thousands of dollars painting my house with a very expensive RF blocking paint to screen, and I screened my windows, all reducing the RF radiation levels in my house. Okay, I'll go real quick here.
Yeah, Mr. Allen, your time's up. Thank you, sir. And we have Vivian Lockery on the Zoom as well.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome.
Hi, Madam Mayor and members of the council. My name's Vivian Lockery, 2211 North 19th Street, Boise resident of 27 years. David DeHaas spoke to you of a recent landmark ruling in a case by the Children's Health Defense and Environmental Health Trust against the FCC. The DC Circuit Court ruled the commission failed to consider evidence of harm, including to children, from 5G and wireless radiation. Now, this ruling challenges the FCC's decision to retain its 1996 safety limits for human exposure to wireless radiation. So certainly Ms. Reagan was right. For the 60 days starting August 13th, the FCC, in light of the vast amount of scientific and medical evidence showing the current guidelines do not adequately protect health and the environment, will have to prove that wrong. I call for denial of this application. The city of Boise needs fast, secure, safe, and reliable internet that can only be achieved with wired infrastructure such as fiber optic to the premises. We, the people, have paid for this infrastructure for decades by way of our fees on phone bills. And the large telecoms have illegally misdirected these subsidies to build their private wireless networks. A DC Court of Appeals decision in March of 2020, the regulators versus the FCC, freed billions of dollars, that's billions of dollars per state, from these misdirected funds. Cities across the US are creating their own municipally owned fiber optic networks, which are far safer, faster, more secure from cyber attacks, and yield a rich revenue source for local governments. This could be a rich revenue source for Boise. I'm calling in from my cabin in Lowman, where I have 4G and 5G via wired fiber optics to the premises service. In the June 14th hearing on this conditional use permit, Hank Allen's presentation included a list of existing wired broadband providers with the coverage map. The majority of those providers had 97 to 100% coverage in Boise. The city of Boise would be prudent to invest in wired infrastructure for high-speed internet, not wireless. The city of Boise must therefore declare a moratorium against new wireless facilities. And again, I call for denial of this permit. Thank you for your time and for your service.
Thank you, Vivian. Is there anyone else online?
No, Madam Mayor.
All right. Nobody else online? Want to check one more time? Okay. So now we go the opposite direction. Yes. Appellant first. Okay. We will hear from the appellant first. Mr. DeHaas, you have a rebuttal if necessary.
Yes. So in this recent ruling, basically what the FCC and the FDD in cahoots with each other is they basically ignored at their own volition any safety data. There's been no proven safety data. Again, your job number one is to keep our city safe. These towers are not for cell phone calls. They're for very slow broadband data. Why do we need that in a city that has nearly 100% coverage with cable? We don't need that. Furthermore, the FCC has been told, you need to come out and come back and prove, do the NEPA reviews, which there's not been one NEPA review done in this city on any of these towers. And they need to prove that. They need to prove that this is safe from harm. You've already heard from one person. I've got numerous other people who have called me and stated they're having headaches. They can't sleep at night. Their kids are having attention deficit disorders all after the towers went up. This is a significant problem. How many people are going to have to die before you stop this? Right now, you have no safety data whatsoever. You don't do this for buildings. You don't allow buildings to go up without proven safety. You look at the strength of the steel that goes in the building. You look at all the data that's going to go into and prove that these buildings are actually going to stand up. But you're not doing that for wireless facilities. I can't understand why you're not. We're at significant risk. This is bigger than COVID. Look at, you can't, as a homeowner, if this tower is 20 feet from my home, I can't turn it off. And you want to make everyone do what Hank's done, to spend thousands of dollars to wrap their home and basically create a Faraday cage around their home to protect this coming into their home 24 hours a day. That is not, we're guaranteed under the Constitution to have privacy and the protection of our private property rights. These towers go against all of that. It's time for the Boise to take a pause. We know, and you guys have admitted in testimony in the past, that your staff is unclear about what a propagation study is. This was not a proper propagation study. There needs to be specifications, just like you would have in a building. There's been no specification. They didn't do a drives test. There was no means potential whatsoever. So given what the court came down and ruled, you need to read the ruling, because this is significant, and this is going to affect us. If you continue to allow these to go in with no safety data, we're going to have a lot of problems, and eventually you're going to have some lawsuits on your hand. Is the city going to have deep pockets to cover that? I don't think so. It's not the kind of city that I want to live in. Other cities have been far more open. Eagle, Idaho has changed their code. Mountain Home says we're wired fiber optics to the premise, which is faster and more superior. This technology is only for broadband, and it's slower than DSL. Why would we submit ourselves as a city to having our bees killed, to having our children harmed, to having people like Hank go into AFib? Why would we do that? Why would we do that without taking the time and taking a pause and say, hey, let's put a moratorium on this right now, and let's take a step back and let's look at the data. Let's get our hands around this rather than just going at warp speed just to put these in because we've got this agreement. It's time to take a pause, and I encourage you. This is one of the biggest decisions I believe you'll make in the history of your time served on this council. This is not going away. If you continue to allow these, there's going to be more people injured, more people hurt from this technology. This is not David's opinion. This is fact. There's over 20,000 studies. I've interviewed Theodore Scarata from the Environmental Health Trust. I've interviewed these people that have been doing this for 20 some years. The data is there. You're not going to find it on Google, it's buried. But the data is there that shows there is significant harm. There's glioblastoma cells. We know because of our activities throughout the country with other people we've dealt with in other cities, people have died from cancer. And if you're in an apartment complex, this tower, which is 30 feet off the ground, it's shooting right there into your bedroom window. And those people have ended up with cancer. They've ended up with ovarian cancer, brain cancer. Safety is your number one job. I ask you to deny this application and put a moratorium on this until you guys get your heads around this and understand what you're putting the city at risk. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And finally, the applicant.
We don't have any rebuttal at this time, but we'd be happy to stand for any questions the council might have.
Thank you. Anything for the applicant? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. With that, this matter is before the council. Yep, we can't really hear you. Great.
Sorry, thank you, Madam
Did I
Mayor.
mess, just a second. Did I mess something up? Nope. Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you. This is an appeal of a decision by the Planning and Zoning Commission. The standards of an appeal are that we need to find an error that the Planning and Zoning Commission has made in their approval of this conditional use permit. As I listened to the testimony, I did not hear anyone suggest that there was an error in that decision, nor could I find one. And with that, I would move to deny the appeal and uphold the decision of the Planning and Zoning Commission on CUP 21-15 at 40 North Owyhee Street.
Second.
We have a motion and a second discussion.
Madam Mayor?
Yeah.
There's a couple of things I think to respond to in some of the testimony we heard. And the first is that without getting into the credibility of it all, there is a disagreement, at least among some people, about the potential health effects of this wireless technology. I mean, we have many jobs here, but one is to follow the law, and the law preempts us from basing decisions in anything other than in this context, in the wireless communication context, anything other than a very limited and narrow set of essentially form and zoning rules. And the reason for that is big and complicated, but basically it's a national technology, it's national communications infrastructure, and our country is going to make a national decision about that. The decision will come from the FCC, its guidance as interpreted by court rulings. The law that we have to follow now says we can regulate certain aspects of the form and certain aspects of the zoning of these towers, but there's other stuff, other information we're not allowed to consider. So we have to follow the law. When I look at what the Planning and Zoning Commission did here, and I look at the assignments of error, the first is that a propagation study was not submitted according to the appellant. And there's a disagreement, I think, about what counts as a propagation study. But we know from our code and from our prior appeals that the study should include the location of existing facilities in the coverage area and some radio frequency modeling that shows why the tower is needed. The applicant here did submit those things. It submitted a map that showed both of those things. And I guess I would point out that the purpose of the propagation study is to show that the tower is really necessary. It's not relevant to the presence of the study, but it's noteworthy that the applicant wants to put a tower in there. They're in a business and they wouldn't want to be doing that unless they had users, unless it was necessary. So I don't see an error in the Planning and Zoning Commission's conclusion that a propagation study was submitted. Another requirement for these submittals that was called out as an error was lack of sufficient engineering documents. And what our code requires is a stamped report from a structural engineer. That's what the applicant submitted. As to the rest of the errors, for these types of CU applications, our city doesn't even require proof of liability insurance. So the Planning and Zoning Commission's conclusion that the absence of those things was not a problem is correct. So when I look at our standard of review for commission decisions and I look at the decision here, I don't see anything that rises to the level of error. So I'll be supporting the motion.
All right. Nothing further. Clerk, we call the roll.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
Woodings,
Yes.
Bajent,
Yes.
all in favor, motion carries.
Thanks. I'm going to go ahead and have us move into this one. And if it gets dragged out, we'll take a break. But I think we ought to just keep going through. So we're going to pick up a CR 21-15. Welcome, Celine. Celine will present for the city, and then John Wardle for the applicant Brighton Development. Centennial is the neighborhood association. We don't expect that Centennial is here, but just want to check.
Madam Mayor, I spoke with them this morning and they're planning to not attend.
Okay. And then we have Louis Spiker, Mr. Spiker. Great. That's right. You said that earlier. Sorry about that. Has signed up. Is anybody online here to testify?
And where I do have Jonathan Wardle, which I'll promote.
Oh, you're on your computer also.
He's the
Okay,
applicant.
great. Okay, wonderful then. We will go ahead and get started. Thanks.
Madam Mayor, council members, before you this evening is a request to rezone 6.47 acres from T1D Technological Industrial with Design Review to R3D Multifamily Residential with Design Review. The site is located near the intersection of DeMeyer and Cloverdale, which is near Chinden Boulevard, home to one of our 4 designated regional activity centers in Blueprint, Boise. The site is located within the Boise Research Center, which is home to the West YMCA, Hobble Creek Park, and various office uses. The land designation is mixed use, which allows for a host of zoning districts, including the requested R3. The T1 zone is not frequently used throughout Boise, as it was always intended for larger warehouse and tech and office type uses. Since the site is mostly undeveloped, the request to R3 would provide a much needed mix of housing to a predominantly detached single family area located so closely to businesses, schools, parks, and transit lines. The request to R3 would facilitate a residential project on site. What you see before you is a concept for 110 attached townhomes with surface parking. There is no associated development agreement with the rezone request, so this plan is merely a concept of what could be developed here. You'll see in the record the commission was initially concerned that there wasn't a DA to lean on, but eventually agreed that a future residential use for the site met the rezone approval criteria in Boise City Code. Plus, they were reassured once again because any project proposed would require additional public hearing process, no matter the density proposed. You'll see on the screen the different next steps required of the development of the site. So if the density is up to 129 units, it would go through design review committee review. And then if the density was over 130 units, it would go through a PUD process with Planning and Zoning Commission, and then a staff level design review. You'll see from the record the public comments were mixed with support and opposition. The main concerns were capacity for nearby parks and roadways. No public agencies have commented in opposition. And in fact, ACHD's review says there's ample capacity on both DeMeyer and Ash Creek streets. And Cloverdale has recently been widened. Other concerns were regarding the mix of density or the nature of the high density for the site, along with the predictability of development for the area. It's true the site was envisioned for office uses, but the things have changed in Boise over the past 30 years since the research center's inception, and the site has not redeveloped successfully within the T1 zone. This is a prime location for additional housing at a different price point within an area with many services and amenities. So in conclusion, the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval of the rezone, and I'll stand for any questions.
Questions for Celine? All right. Mr. Wardle, welcome. Yep, I think did you make him a panelist?
She did.
Great.
Madam Mayor, good evening. My name is John Wardle. My address is 2929 West Navigator Drive, Suite 400, Meridian, Idaho 83642. Good evening. It's been a while since I've been in a Boise City Council meeting, and it's good to be here with you tonight. As mentioned by staff, this is a request to rezone 6.47 acres within the Boise Research Center. Shown in the middle of the exhibit here, the aerial, you'll see a red boundary, and this is where the area that we're asking to rezone. It's within the square mile bounded by Chinden to the north, Eagle Road to the west, McMillan to the south, and Cloverdale. More specifically, we are adjacent to DeMeyer, but the access to this site is from Ash Creek to Discovery and also to Meeker out to Cloverdale Road. The property was subdivided and previously developed in 2004 as an interim parking lot, as you can see from this aerial right here. The request before you is to repurpose the parking lot and develop two-story townhomes on this site. As Celine had mentioned, the area here, the Boise Research Center, is designated as general mixed use. In the general mixed use, area, that goes all the way up to Chinden, over to Cloverdale. It actually touches Park Meadows, which is part of Hobble Creek, and then comes down to DeMeyer. That's generally the area that is designated as general mixed use. The mixed use designation is identified along corridors to create a foundation for regional community and also neighborhood activities. Included in that, there's a mix of uses: retail, commercial, office, restaurants, and high density residential, which would be served by existing or future transit, wider sidewalks, and bike lane networks. As you can see from the comprehensive plan table for general mixed use, which is highlighted there in pink, and as you scroll through there, most every land use or zoning designation is a potential use zone that could occur in general mixed use. And I've also highlighted the R3, which is with the check mark there. You can see that it is shown that it would be an allowed use within general mixed use comprehensive plan. Right here is the comprehensive plan. Celine had shown this earlier, where the area that we are asking to rezone is bounded in blue. And also the current zoning of the area, T1D. But as you see that we are adjacent to R1C on the south, there's also an R3 designation within this mixed use designation up there on Chinden, bounded by Discovery, and Park Meadow on the west. And then just a side-by-side comparison of both of those. We are requesting the R3 designation, which is an allowed use on the mixed use designation, the comprehensive plan. And it's also a designation which is found in this area, previously zoned and has been developed. I just want to go into a couple small items here, and then I'll stand for any questions that you have. I want to go over just kind of general, very quickly, information about the project, circulation for the project, because I know that traffic and transportation is always a question that comes up, and also system capacity. While not required, we did want to provide a very clear direction of what we intended to do with the property from a development perspective. As noted, we are planning to build 2-story townhomes. They up to 110 of those. This same exhibit has been shown and provided in our pre-application meetings, in our neighborhood meeting, and as well as the Planning and Zoning Commission. We've been consistent on that through the process. One of the items that was of particular concern for the neighbors of the south was DeMeyer, and what this project meant for DeMeyer in terms of vehicular access. Currently, when the Boise Research Center was developed, DeMeyer was not opened, meaning there was no access from BRC to DeMeyer. That was a condition of approval, that there not be any vehicular access between existing DeMeyer and the Boise Research Center. Just to be clear, we are not proposing any access to DeMeyer. We have access on Ash Creek. We can get to Meeker, out to Explorer, then to Cloverdale, and also Discovery and up to Chinden. The red dots represent and show you where there are existing stoplights at those intersections. However, there are deficiencies with DeMeyer. DeMeyer currently is only improved on the south side. There's no curb and gutter on the north side. There's no sidewalk, pedestrian access, or anything like that. It is a collector, but it doesn't really function like one with the needed access for pedestrians. So we are proposing, as shown here in purple, we are actually going to build a curb, gutter, sidewalk, storm drainage on the north side of DeMeyer. We're going to, so that that roadway can be complete. One of the things with a residential collector, it's also no parking. There have been signs there. There's only one sign remaining, but ACHD notes that that residential collector should be a no parking street. And that was a concern for neighbors as well about parking on that street and walking in. So that signage will be put in place. Additionally, we will be installing a solid fence around the property on the south, east, and west. There are areas in the berm that exist right now, which has very mature landscaping that have some gaps in them. I've highlighted those yellow areas where we would be replacing that landscaping and enhancing it, as well as landscaping throughout the project. And finally, there is a pathway connection that goes over towards Hobble Creek. It's in an unopened ACHD right-of-way, meaning they don't intend to put a road there, but part of that is paved and part of it's gravel. In talking with ACHD, and also we mentioned that there's an opportunity to complete that so that you have a direct access over to Hobble Creek Park. At the end of the arrow there, it goes over to the edge of the property and then hits a pathway that goes up to Hollow Creek Park and down into Brookdale Meadows. And so we want to make that system for pedestrians and cyclists complete. Finally, just want to touch quickly on existing infrastructure. This exhibit here is from Compass, and I know you've seen this before, but I just wanted to highlight a couple of things regarding housing. Housing within 1 mile, there's about 3,300 opportunities for living out here. There, however, are 8,430 jobs, meaning the ratio is 2.5. Ideally, you'd want to see that between 1 and 1.5. What it means is this location is ideal to provide more housing for jobs that already exists out here. So there's an opportunity to add living opportunities which are close to employment and services. A couple other highlights to note here is public safety is close by. We're within 1.3 miles of a fire station. There's public schools nearby. In this square mile, we have 2 elementary schools, we have a high school, we also have a junior high. And there's more than enough capacity in Joplin Elementary, where if there were children going to elementary school, there's space there. There's capacity or close to capacity in both the middle school and the high school as well. And finally, we're also very close to a public park where the city has invested dollars in that facility. In summary, the rezone request is consistent with the comprehensive plan and the mixed use designation. It's located near existing amenities, services, schools, employment, and transportation options. As it relates to DeMeyer, we are not going to add any trips to DeMeyer. We're not accessing it. We're not poking a road through there. There will be no vehicles on DeMeyer. We will, however, be improving DeMeyer so that we have a road, a collector that will function the way it should. And we will maintain and enhance the existing buffer in DeMeyer. So tonight we agree with the staff report and Planning and Zoning Commission's recommendation for approval, and we request the City Council's approval tonight for CAR 210015. I stand for any questions you might have at this time.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Well, it's good to see you. It's been a
My pleasure.
while. Welcome. So my question for you, on the staff report we got, it shows actually 2 pathway connections to DeMeyer. I was unclear on what you showed us, if those were going to still be there. I appreciate that you want to protect DeMeyer from vehicle access, but protecting it from pedestrian access means that whoever lives here will not be able to visit anyone to the south.
Madam Mayor, Council Member Clegg, thank you for the question. Regarding access, there currently is a pedestrian access on the east side.
Right.
That remains.
Okay.
And the access, it gets up to the public sidewalks. We were specifically asked to not provide any other access points through there by the neighbors when we met with them in the neighborhood meetings. But we do have an opportunity down here where you have the access down to Hobble Creek to provide another access into the site and minimize the openings along DeMeyer.
So you were specifically asked by the neighborhood not to provide that access?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Clegg, the concerns from the neighbors were that it would invite people, and we explained this, right? But that it would invite people to park on DeMeyer in the neighborhoods and walk in. And so by maintaining the existing pedestrian access as exists now, there will be no parking allowed on DeMeyer. I do think that there would be an opportunity to provide some additional pedestrian connections to a new sidewalk, but I'm just wanted to relay to you what was brought up in the neighborhood meetings and also in conversations with the Centennial Neighborhood Association.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, if I could ask another question related. And I appreciate that. And this is not a subdivision plat or even a PUD. So those issues will be addressed at that point, but I wanted to bring it up. The other issue that will be addressed later and not today is what ultimately gets built here. And I appreciate that you brought forward a proposed site design that shows what your intention is, but You also noted with the compass analysis that there are tremendously more jobs than there are housing in this particular part of town, and wondered if you considered doing something more dense on the north side and keeping the south side more at the townhouse level that you're proposing.
Madam Mayor, Council Member Clegg, that's a good question. We wanted to be, as you can see from this, where we have our site plan overlaid the aerial. We wanted to acknowledge the existing single-family residential neighborhood to the south. And the concern that always comes up is, will homes be overlooking into our windows and that type of thing? We wanted to make a commitment up front that we would just do 2-story townhomes, that these would not be 3-story. There are 3-story apartments in the Boise Research Center, Renaissance, but they are not directly adjacent to residential and a single-family nature like this, or at least separated by a much larger road. So we didn't consider that. We considered just doing 2-story townhomes throughout. The overall density here would be about 17.5 units per acre based on this site plan. So we don't hit the upper end of the R3, but it is more dense than a single family or R1C designation to the south.
Thank you. I'd appreciate that. I would note again for the record that residential is not incompatible with residential. Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Yep.
So quick question, I guess, about the wall that's surrounding the place. Was that a request from the neighbors as well?
Madam Mayor, Council Member Halliburton, good evening. Nice to meet you.
Nailed it.
It was a request. There exists a chain link fence along that entire property. It sits on the boundary. It sits kind of on the downslope side of it. There was a request that there be some privacy created by that. So we have proposed to replace that chain link fence with a solid fence so that privacy could occur.
Madam Mayor, just quick follow-up question. Maybe it's for staff. I guess I'm just trying to understand how common it is for us to require for a neighborhood like this to be completely separated from another neighborhood and walled off.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, these are just neighborhood requests within, the pre-application neighborhood meeting process. It's certainly not a requirement in code, and nor would we normally encourage that kind of cutoff between neighborhoods or residential uses from one another.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I guess just to comment on why I asked that question, I can certainly understand the desire for privacy from the neighbors in that area. I also see some potential issues in walling off a community from the rest of the neighborhood. And I guess I'm just trying to, in my head, think about where we're doing that in other areas, if it's successful, and if it really doesn't isolate one neighborhood from another. And so I guess I have some slight concerns about walling off an entire neighborhood.
Madam Mayor, can I just make one comment related to that? Councilmember Halliburton, it's a good question for sure. It's not uncommon, however, throughout the city of Boise, where we have arterials and collector roads, that we would have enhanced landscaping, berming, and fencing. Although DeMeyer feels like just a local street, it is designated as a collector. It does carry some traffic. I'm not, I hear what you're saying with access or fencing through. We did show some originally. As you can see, there's clearly some opportunities where the sidewalk is coming to the south internally, and there'd be maybe some opportunities, some limited opportunities to create some access through. I just wanted to communicate to you the request that came up through the neighborhood meeting process.
Thank you. And Madam Mayor, I guess just following up with that one more time real quickly, I really appreciate the extra effort that you've gone with accommodating the neighborhood. I think that the no parking signs along the sidewalk does a good job at encouraging people to not park along there, which I think is their biggest fear. I think for me to really see the big fence around there without any openings whatsoever, it seems like you addressed that very well with the no parking signs. And I don't know that it's necessarily needed to have no access going through. And it seems like it would create a more inclusive community if there was at least some access points from one neighborhood to the other.
Madam Mayor.
Yep.
Just follow up on that on the policy side. Our policy is that there be an access point every 350 to no more than 500 feet. And that would mean at least 2 more access points, more likely 3 to 4 in this space if that policy is followed when the application is brought forward for the actual design.
All right. Nothing further for the applicant? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll see you in a minute. Mr. Spiker? And then are the rest of you here, sir? Are you here to testify tonight? Okay, ma'am? Okay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, council
there.
members. My name is Louis Spiker. I'm with Yanksman Johnson. I'm at 199 North Capitol Boulevard, Suite 200 here in Boise. I'm here on behalf of John and Lisa Lane. We're the trustees of Mountain West IRA Incorporated 401k, which actually owns the property directly to the west of the parcels that Brighton is seeking to develop. Well, we've had discussion about the impact of the neighborhood to the south. I feel that my clients are most likely going to be impacted the most in this situation. And I say that for a specific reason. When you put residential next to the existing T1 zoning, you have a setback which drastically limits the use of my client's property. This matters because there's a proposed development for approximately a 20,000 square foot commercial building. The property is currently under contract for the buyer that's going to build that building, and they will not be able to build that, and that sale will not be able to go through. In addition to just the decrease to my clients, the value of that parcel, I think it's important to look at what the requirement is for a rezone on a couple of things. The future land use designation of mixed use does not mandate of a rezone to a residential use here. The council still has to see whether the proposed rezone is in accordance with the comprehensive plan. The issue with this situation is when you look at the—
Could you pull closer to the mic? Thanks.
Absolutely.
Thank you. That makes a big difference.
Alrighty. The issue with this particular rezone and the staff report that's before Madam Mayor and the council members is that the justification that's used that this rezone is in compliance with the comprehensive plan is based on, in large part, that this property is located on a collector, located on a travel corridor. But what's not in front of the court is something to remove the existing restriction from this parcel to be able to access to Meyer. You can't use that transportation corridor as a justification when it doesn't actually apply to the property that's being sought to be rezoned. The other aspect that I feel is within the comprehensive plan is that when you look at the West Bench goal, CCN 3, which is to support the retention of regionally significant uses, that's not limited to the sub-goal, which is the Hewlett-Packard industrial area. The Boise Tech Park, or the Boise Research Center, is a significant established use, and you're going to prohibit the future development of that existing use by allowing residential in this situation.
Madam Mayor, time.
Yes.
Happy to answer any questions.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
question about the setback and the building that's under contract now. Do you know off the top of your head what the setback difference is and how, I'm just trying to get a grip on whether it's so unmanageable that it like really destroys the current economic prospects for the property, or whether it's something that we might be able to work with you on to help you out.
What my client's engineer is telling us is that on the eastern boundary of that parcel to the west, there would be 100-foot setback. We recognize that there's already setbacks on the southern side and on the western side from those residential uses. But when you come 100 feet from the eastern border, simply you can't put a 20,000 square foot building there.
Thank you. Do you know off the top of your head how wide your parcel is east to west? If you don't, that's fine. I'm just looking at it, trying to visualize mental geometry to see what you're talking about here.
I may have that.
You know what? I can see it here on
There you go.
Google Maps, and it's less than 200 feet. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anything further?
Question for staff, if I could. I'm looking in the zoning code. I can't find the setbacks for the T1. Could you maybe talk a little more about that?
Yes, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Clegg and Councilmember Bajent. The T1 zone next to, when adjacent to residential uses or districts, has a 100-foot setback. And so for the parcel that the previous person was talking about, they would have residential uses and districts on 3 sides of that parcel. So you'd have a 100-foot setback on the east, west, and south. We have been in discussions with a couple of people that have been interested in developing the site. From my recollection, the building footprint would be about 12,000 square feet. They're certainly at liberty to ask for a variance request due to the greater setback that is starting to encroach into their property because of the uses that are surrounding the site. But that would go through a public process if that was to be the wish of the future developer of the site.
Madam Mayor, if I could follow up.
Yep.
So this development was initially all one development, was all zone T1. Even though you carve off a piece in the middle, you change the setback requirement of the piece that's left. And is there any way, if we choose to do this rezone, that we could make an allowance within it that the setback of the adjacent property not be affected through a DA, through something? Is there some way to do that?
Madam Mayor, I'm not sure, or Madam Mayor, Councilmember Clegg, I'm not entirely sure that the DA would only be able to affect the property itself and not necessarily be able to impact adjacent properties and their setbacks. So I think it would have to be a different process in order to allow for that outside of the proposed site.
Okay.
Madam
It looks
Mayor.
like maybe the developer's thinking about that, and we might have an answer from them too, hopefully. Thanks.
Madam Mayor.
I have a follow-up to that question also, Celine.
Yep.
So if it's not abutting a residential use, then what is the setback?
Oh, I can't remember. I have to look it up. Thank
Looks like Mr. Wardle has it.
you. 60 feet for single story and 70 for 2-story.
Okay, so we're looking at a difference of 40 feet. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
continuing to keep Porcelain on the spot. My question is about the purpose of the setback, right, which is to provide a buffer and to distinguish uses and to make it comfortable and happy for everybody to be there. So the main point is that that space is used to set buildings apart. And I wonder if there's any time that you can think of that we have required the functional equivalent of a setback by asking a applicant to either grant an easement that may be used for the setback purpose or to commit to not developing, in this case, 30 to 40 feet of the east edge of the property, or some other mechanism to accomplish the purpose of the setback, which is the physical separation, without actually requiring anyone to or asking anyone to transfer land.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Bajent, it would be a variance process is what you're talking about. We can certainly ask for a greater setback on the western side for this property, but there would still be that setback requirement for the western property. And so, I think it's important to know this plan or this site image doesn't show the parcel lines, but we've got the pathway to Hobble Creek Park to the west, and then the open right of way that's not developed but acts as a path to the south. With the variance process, if a future person or future developer would want to develop the site, we would certainly take that into consideration, that open right of way for pedestrians is acting that, as part of that buffer. Certainly not wanting to get rid of that 100-foot setback completely, but it's certainly accommodated for in these places already.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Yep.
Celine, do you know of something that the owner of that property on the side could do immediately prior to even knowing what they're going to develop there to ensure that they secure some sort of agreement with the city that they will only be held to a specified setback as opposed to the greater one?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Thompson, I suppose if they had applied for an application yesterday and this zone had not been in place, then it would have been a lesser setback. But once this rezone is approved and effective, then we have to base it off of that 100-foot setback. Past that, it would be some sort of request process to ask for that variance in the setback.
Thank you.
I'm just going to hold off for a minute while Councilman's talking with council.
Madam Mayor, while we're waiting, Celine, I'm looking online at some of the rest of the development within the research park, and it appears to me that there are buildings built within less than 100 feet of various lines that end up in the park, whether they be a roadway edge or something. Was the research park built with just as one big lot and that didn't matter? I mean, it appears to me as I look at these that there are other places where the 100 feet doesn't apply. And if it's 100 feet all around in a T1, I'm just curious how that worked out.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Clegg, I'd have to look at the specifics, of course, but the 100-foot setback is only adjacent to residential. But the Boise Research Center and Hobble Creek subdivision as a whole was, a big master use kind of planned unit development, if you will, over 30 years ago, in the sense that, they did probably accommodate for reduced internal setbacks for the various uses that they had planned for.
Anything? All right, I'm
Not right now,
gonna, if this is, you're good with questions for now? Okay, I'm gonna see if anybody else is here. And then I think folks have some sorting out to do. Is the Centennial, I just want to double check Centennial Neighborhood Association?
Madam Mayor, there's no one online.
Okay, and there's nobody online.
There is nobody.
All right, so this is it. We'll have the applicant come on back up. Hey there. How are you?
Good, Madam Mayor.
Your cleanup crew tonight?
Well, I've got a 30-plus year history with the whole project since this is one of the first ones I ever did. And
I was thinking that it might be.
and I think I can clarify a lot of the questions that have come up here. So hopefully I can do that. And as I look back at this project, I was about half the age I am now. And it was, I think we set a lot of landmarks out here. I remember redesigning the whole master plan to accommodate the YMCA, the Hobble Creek Park, the Boise City Aquatic Center. I remember developing this parking lot right here for DirecTV because they were out of parking capacity. And now we find ourselves in an entirely different situation. After 15 years of leasing that property, well, I think it was probably 3 years ago, they decided they no longer needed it. And I think that's going to be something you're going to see more and more of in the future as parking ratios probably decrease with all sorts of technology and ride sharing and those kind of things. I want to address specifically, well, actually a little stroll down memory lane. When we got this project approved and we got the adjacent Hobble Creek project approved, pretty much at the same time we redid this master plan, the city council specifically prohibited any vehicular connection between Hobble Creek and Boise Research Center. Now you think about that today and you think, what were we thinking? What were they thinking? But that's where we are. And so the times have changed. We think this is an excellent reuse of an existing surface parking lot. To the setback question, and I've gone through this, multiple buildings, multiple planning directors, multiple everything. The way that the planning department, and believe me, this has come back on application after application, the setback issue. It was determined a long time ago that that setback issue was for perimeter projects, not within the master plan development. And so with respect to this property in the southwest corner, we don't believe the 100-foot setback applies. Even if it did, we have no issue with the variance to allow for that reduced setback. So I would just like to take that question off the table because I do not believe it should be an issue. I think they should be able to develop their property the same whether this is an R3 zone or a T1D zone. So if that satisfies the council, we're willing to put that on the record. Otherwise, I think it's been noted the job to resident imbalance, probably the mix of the housing imbalance. I was in a meeting last week with the WAFED executive team, including their CEO out of Seattle. They purchased the building right across the street to the north. They have 100,000 square feet with a major employment center there. They definitely want places for their people to live where they can walk to work. So we think this is an excellent reuse of this property. I think it's much needed. And I don't know that I need to say anything more than that. I'll stand for any questions.
I need you to say one more thing, and that is your
Address,
name
same
and
as John's.
address.
David Trumbull, 2929 West Navigator,
Thank you.
Meridian, Idaho. Thank you. Thank you
Madam
for the
Mayor,
reminder. I'm not used to this.
Madam Mayor, I'm sorry, I didn't get his name.
David Turnbull.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor. Thanks. So clearly the building to the north of the parcel that's worried about the setback is, by my measurements, about 55 feet from the back of the lot. I guess the other question is, has there been any discussion with the owners of this property of doing even more residential, which would alleviate the need for the question about the setback to begin with?
No, we haven't had any. You mean the property directly to the west, the applicant, the people that have testified here? I think this is kind of the first we've heard from them when they presented their testimony here. So it hasn't been an issue that has been on the table.
Thank you.
I mean, we'd certainly consider it for sure.
Yeah. Well, given the imbalance,
I would point out, excuse me, Madam Mayor, Councilman Clegg, if you want to look at these, it shows one existing building right directly south of the YMCA. There is a 30-foot pathway easement that we created for access to the park. And that in addition to, I think, a 70-foot setback to the building.
okay, that's where you get the
is the
70.
100 feet. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.
All right. Anything further for staff? Yep.
One more question for probably legal staff. I don't know. I don't want you to rule from the bench by any means, but just a question about whether it's appropriate to put on the record that we recognize the challenges this may create for the lot to the west, and that we have heard the testimony of the applicant in terms of their lack of concern about trying to, helping them, their willingness to help find a solution. Would it help to put on that on the record in a future application on that property?
Madam Mayor, Council President, I think that's clearly on the record just by virtue of what you said and what Mr. Turnbull said. It's not necessarily binding, but it might have some sort of moral weight.
Thank you.
All right.
All I have.
You've got anybody else? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I would move approval of CAR 21-15 Brighton Development 12481 West Ash Creek Street rezone of 8.08 acres from T1D to R3D. And if I get a second, I'll explain my motion.
Second. We have a motion and a second.
Thank you. Actually, I forgot to add one thing to the motion, if the seconder so agrees, that that the council directs staff that any application that comes forward on this land have pedestrian access in the appropriate distances to the south.
Seconder agrees.
All right, so it's
Thank
Jane.
you. Okay. I believe this is an excellent place for residential. I believe the applicant made the case that residential is lacking in this high job area, and very much support the change in use, recognizing that there needs to be access to the neighborhood to the south, even though it won't be vehicular access, and that the council recognizes the potential challenges this creates for the lot to the west, and recognize the applicant's willingness to work with that landowner and support any variances that may be needed to allow development of that lot appropriately.
Madam Mayor,
Yes, go ahead.
I think just about anytime you can get rid of a massive surface parking lot, that's probably a good thing for the city. When you can do it while incorporating all this housing and some additional pedestrian bicycle access, I think that that's great as well. And so I think that there's a huge victory there, looking at a better use for this property. And then I think I just finally would note, I think in the spirit of our mayor's vision of creating a city for everyone, building walls between us, isn't necessarily the best way to do it, and making sure that neighborhoods are connected to each other, that kids can go from their backyard to another neighbor's backyard and play, and that one neighborhood isn't truly separated from the other. To me, that's really part of that vision. So I appreciate Council President Clegg including the policy statement of trying to create those access points from one area to another. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, a couple of thoughts. I'll be supporting the motion as amended because that was one of my primary concerns. You know, that part of the basis for the rezone is that it's adjacent to other residential property. And then of course, if you wall it all off and make it completely separate, it's not really very adjacent anymore. So I also strongly feel that opening it up is the right thing to do. I would be skeptical, frankly, even of a privacy fence with gates in it. The point is to establish connectivity, but I think that's something that we will deal with later. On the setback issue, it's new for me, and I'm glad it's not new for everyone here. That was helpful to hear. And based on our discussion here and the applicant's openness, I think it's something that we're going to be able to work out. What I would love to be able to tell Mr. Spiker's clients is, we're going to get it worked out. Don't worry, because I know that you have a contract. You probably have lenders. You have all kinds of underwriters who are going to see this and freak out and do underwritery things. And that's very stressful. I can't, unfortunately, it's against the rules for me or anybody to make a promise about what a future council will do. But based on everything we've heard and on how cooperative and helpful the applicant has been, both to the neighborhood and to us, I feel like this is going to be able to work out. I wish I could give you something more definitive than that, but that's what we can do. So I'll be voting to support the motion, signaling how strongly I believe that connectivity, at a minimum, pedestrian connectivity is important, and congratulating the applicant for being so open to working with its neighbors on making sure that their economic prospects are preserved just as well as your own. So thank you.
Madam Mayor, just want to note that I 100% agree, support the motion. I agree with what Councilmember Halliburton said. I think the signs will work on their own in keeping the parking off that street, and having those pathway connectivity is extremely important for kids and adults and pets. And so I'll be supporting that going forward as well. And thanks a lot, David. Another outstanding job on a remarkable development.
Madam Mayor, thank you. Yeah, I concur with everything my colleagues have said. And one thing I appreciate is recognizing that something like a fence, how that can seem to serve one segment of the community, but overall it really doesn't. You know, one of the most difficult parts of being up here over the past 4 years has been hearing members of our community who are property owners come before us and denigrate renters. And it's really painful because statistically, it looks like we are heading towards possibly at least having half of our city be renters. I think right now we're, at 43%. And something as seemingly innocent and innocuous as a fence actually isn't. So it's a visual reminder of us and them, and there is no them, there's just us. So I really appreciate my colleagues for pointing that out and wanting to remove some of those barriers that keep us separated from each other. So I'll be supporting the motion as well.
Madam Mayor. Thank you for bringing this. I remember a couple of years ago when we were talking about infill among, planning staff and some folks in leadership, we were like, we have enough surface parking in this city that if we had infill development on all of it, we would be able to accomplish all of our housing goals just on surface parking lots, which I think is remarkable. And so I love seeing that vision in action and actually replacing some surface parking with some livable space for people. And I think that I'm just going to add to what my wonderful colleagues have already said about connectivity and taking down fences. I think that one thing that the adjacent neighbors might not realize yet is that by not having a fence there, it also adds to their walkability in their neighborhood. There are tremendous employment opportunities in the adjacent area. They maybe then wouldn't have to go all the way around either end of this development to reach them. So I look forward to seeing this built out, see the workforce housing that is likely to result, and see a lot more walkability for this neighborhood, which I think is really neat. So thanks.
Well, I won't be voting, but I just want to say thank you for working it out. Encourage you to come back sooner than later, while the council's thoughts on this are fresh. And agree with Councilmember Woodings pointing out that, just as we're looking at our surface parking lots as a city and where we have tool sheds and different things for housing, to see others doing the same is great, because this is exactly what we need to ensure that we've got a home for everyone here. With that, clerk, go ahead and take a vote.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
Woodings.
Yes.
Bajent.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Madam Mayor, I move we adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.